Hello and welcome to Kingston Now. I'm Jimmy Buff. Last week we introduced you to Congressman Chris Gibson, who is running for re-election in the newly redrawn 19th Congressional District. This week we'll introduce you to Julian Schreibman, the man who is running against him. First, we're going to talk with Laurie, Slavin, and Ginny Botero of Hudson Valley Adoption Services based here in Kingston. Welcome.
Thank you.
So Hudson Valley Adoption Services, based on Fair, we were talking just before we started, is on Fair Street in Uptown Kingston.
That's right.
I was surprised to find out that it's a pretty new organization. Can you tell me about it, Laurie?
Yes, I relocated here with my family about 4 years ago after running an adoption agency in South Florida for 20 years and really didn't think that I would be continuing that kind of work, but I came to find out that there was no adoption agency anywhere near here in 5 to 7 counties around. And something made me just continue the work. Mm-hmm. So I met various people that were interested in doing it with me as a group, and we put in our application, and now we're fully licensed and approved as a New York State adoption agency.
So who are some of the other organizations who you go to visit?
Oh, we go to foster the children's home in Poughkeepsie. We go to the community action centers throughout Dutchess County, Greene County, Orange County, Cornell Co-op in Orange County. We've gone to different hospitals.
We've been to birth center counseling places. Really anybody who we were hoping to establish a relationship with Healthy Start, and pretty much anybody that might have a clientele where there could be a crisis parenting situation or unexpected pregnancy situation where there really hasn't been anybody around who could provide a resource for someone to at least talk about what their options are.
So tell me about Hudson Valley Adoption Services. How does it function in a broad view?
Okay, how it does function and how it might function in the future are kind of two different things. What the vision and the mission of the organization is to provide an alternative, a private alternative to what the state does when there's some problems in a home.
What does the state do?
The state will respond to complaints of neglect or abuse, and generally, if they're serious, remove the child and place the child into a temporary foster care situation. And in the past, there really wasn't any local resource for a parent to go to as an alternative to that. To choose another home for the child, to have counseling about what an open adoption might be. There are children in foster care whose parents are not likely to regain custody of them, and those kids are growing up in foster care. Whereas if those parents had made a different choice and an informed choice, that those kids could be in permanent homes. Also, there are people who are pregnant, couples who may not be planning to stay together, or women who don't have support, family support, and financial resources to really become parents at that moment in their life. They may not be aware of what modern adoption is like. Modern adoption is you choose your own adoption plan, one that suits your life, your family. It does involve you giving up your child, the parental rights, but it doesn't mean you'll never see your child again. And I think that people around here just don't know about it.
That does seem pretty modern, because when you talk about adoption, a lot of people think, of the Dickens and, Charles Dickens books, and, child is taken and that's it. They never see their family again. So this modern option, when did that come into the picture?
Well, it's not as new as you may think. Open adoption's been around for, I don't know, 20 or 30 years, but in various places it's more in vogue or more well known, and I don't think that that option is very well publicized here, or that people know about it. If you place your child through a state, for example, the Department of Public Services, the state, whether you do it voluntarily or if they take the child from you, it is not an option. Open adoption is not an option under that system, as far as I know, and I believe I know. However, and open adoption is not the only kind of adoption we do. When we say that we tailor it to the people, we really mean that. Confidential adoption is fine. What's known as semi-open adoption, which means that you get information and letters about your birth child, but that you don't necessarily visit and be a part of that child's life until they're grown. There's so many permutations along the spectrum of open versus confidential adoption that there's a place for everyone there. And some adoptive parents have their own preferences as well, of course, not just birth parents. So, finding that match is what we like to do.
So what is the process for someone who is hoping to adopt a child? Is that a good place to start, or should we start with what is the process for someone who is in the situation of giving up a child?
Either way, there are some general rules about adopting, and that is that you have to be found suitable to adopt. So if you're working with an adoption agency such as ourselves, we have to find you suitable to adopt, and we do that through a home study process, which looks at various aspects of your life as a family. You don't have to be married, or you can be married, you can be single. Gender orientation is not an issue. There are many different kinds of adoptive families, but given whoever you are, you do have to be, you have to verify who you are. You have to show where you work, how you earn your money, where you live, where you were born, and tell the story of your life to someone who is clinically trained to assess you, and write a report, which is called a home study. So with an approved home study, you're pretty much there. That's your passport to adoption. And then it's a question of the identification of a child for you, which can be done in many different ways.
I imagine that interview process, that screening process is pretty vigorous.
It is.
Great. So we're going to take a break right now, and when we come back, let's talk about the other side of the scenario.
Sure.
This is Kingston Now. More in a moment. Welcome back to Kingston Now. This week we're talking about adoption services locally with Laurie Slavin and Ginny Botero of Hudson Valley Adoption Services. Now, before the break, Laurie, we were talking about prospective parents and what they have to go through to adopt. I imagine that the choice to give up a child is an exceedingly difficult one.
Yes, can be.
What is the process for someone who wants to do that?
Okay, the variations are as numerous as the number of people involved. Every adoption is unique. So anybody that might be considering adoption has to be considered and interacted with as if they were the only person in the world, because every child has two biological parents, so it's not just a mom, there's also a dad. There may be grandparents involved, there may be siblings of that prospective adoptee involved. So it is a very deep, spiritual, and intense experience to give up a child and also to adopt a child, and also to work as an adoption professional. You have to respect the process from many different aspects and many different points of view. So for a person who is considering, the first step would be to speak to somebody about many options, not just adoption, such as, is there anybody else in the family, perhaps, who could take responsibility for the child? Is there anybody who could take responsibility temporarily? Is there anybody who can support you while you keep the child? And what are the reasons for wanting to give up the child? There's many reasons. Rape could be a reason. Homelessness could be a reason. There's some situations that really just can't be corrected. But there are others that, with some kind of help and direction, you can stop short of that step of relinquishing your child forever. If adoption is really the best option for the child, that means that the parents have made a permanency plan. They are thinking more of the child than they are of themselves. They are basically trying to put that child in a place where that child has a chance of becoming a successful person and a happy person, a well-adjusted and nurtured person. If adoption is an option, the next thing that a birth parent has to consider is how much interaction, or what do I want to know about the adoptive family? How much interaction do I want with them? What do I want to know about the child as the child grows? Do I want to see pictures periodically? Do I want to have letters and reports from the adoptive family about how the child's doing? How often, if so? Do I even want to visit and maybe be part of the child's extended family? How far do I want to go in terms of following that child in life? If I have children already, I have to consider the impact of the adoption on my existing children. How do I deal with the fact that they may be afraid that I'm going to give them up to? There's a lot of psychological and counseling and support that is really needed to take a situation from a scary kind of crisis situation and make it into some joyous transition situation. And we try to do that as much as possible.
You are a private agency?
Correct.
So is your operating capital coming from the adoption fees, or do you get support from the state and federal agencies at all?
Well, at present, no, because we're still in the process of applying for our 501c3 exemption, which makes us a charity.
No, yeah.
We're organized as a nonprofit. We are a charity, but we have to be recognized as such by the federal government first. So there is a really long backlog for reviewing those applications. But as soon as that is in effect, then we can apply for grants. A grant, for example, a good grant for us would be for prospective adoptive parent training, for example, or birth parent counseling, or adoptee reunions. You know, just a concrete thing that we do that it's hard to charge for. It's hard, you know, that kind of thing we might apply for a grant. The actual adoption services, placing the child, the adoptive parents pay for that. So to that extent, we're fee for service.
Laurie Slavin, Ginny Botero from the Hudson Valley Adoption Services, thanks for being on the show today.
Thank you so much for inviting us.
This is Kingston Now. Next we'll meet Julian Schreibman, the Democrats' choice to take on Republican Chris Gibson for Congress in the 19th District. Stay tuned. You're watching Kingston Now. Julian Schreibman is a former federal prosecutor and assistant general counsel for the CIA. He received the Attorney General's Distinguished Service Award for assisting in the prosecution of 4 al-Qaeda members for bombing U.S. embassies, and most recently was a senior assistant district attorney in Ulster County. Welcome to the show, Julian.
Thanks, Jimmy. It's great to be here.
Now, we say CIA. We're not talking about the Culinary Institute, right?
Well, we're not. It was a privilege to serve at the Central Intelligence Agency in Langley.
What an extraordinary experience that must have been.
It really was. And, you know, that's where I was on 9/11. And so we were, you know, there watching things happen here in New York and, of course, the strike on the Pentagon. So it was an extraordinary experience, and so a privilege to, at the same time, be helping to send al-Qaeda members to prison for life for the mass murder of citizens in Kenya and Tanzania.
You are a Kingston resident. You grew up, born and raised in Kingston, is that correct?
Technically, my parents moved me here when I was a newborn. But grew up right down on Salkill Road near here, and my mom's business, the Ann Hebard School of Ballet, is a short stone's throw from where we're sitting right now. So.
Oh, that's great. Now, you came back home to Ulster County to work for the district attorney's office.
Yes.
What prompted that move?
To be honest, I'm an only child, and my dad was diagnosed with leukemia. And so my wife and I were living in the city for a brief period of time when I was a federal prosecutor, and it was important to me to be close to family and provide the support there. And having been a prosecutor, having been in public service, I wanted to continue to serve the community, and especially my home communities here in Ulster County.
Now, those are all really well-esteemed job. People look up special prosecutor, CIA, put al-Qaeda, but what in the world do you want to run for Congress for?
You know, it's very much about being back here in the community. I got to live the American dream. You know, my mom's an immigrant. She came to this country with the same dream that so many people come here, and her small business supported my family growing up. My dad grew up in the Depression. He didn't get to finish 9th grade. Joined the Army and went to Europe in 1943. So to me, I got to have opportunities that my parents could only dream of. Unfortunately, with the dysfunction we have in Washington, that dream is farther and farther out of reach. And it's not forces beyond our control. It's not an accident of history. It's choices and decisions made that favor the powerful, favor the influential, and leave working class families farther and farther behind. So I really want to make sure that dream is available to the next generation of kids growing up here in the Hudson Valley.
Well, that dysfunction from the sidelines, from the, you know, just sitting here on the sidelines, is what leads to people thinking, having such low approval ratings for members of Congress, is because we look at those divisions along ideological and party lines and think how they're supposed to be running the country, not fighting with each other. So how are you going to affect some change with that? Right.
Well, we need to make a big change from the current representation. Congressman Gibson, unfortunately, who is the congressman whose district now encompasses Ulster County here, has followed the Tea Party agenda, which is very much a part of why things haven't been working in Washington, focusing on things like defunding Planned Parenthood, making it harder for women to access health care, turning Medicare into a coupon program. My view, having spent my career in nonpartisan public service, is that the first mission, if you're going to be sent to Washington, is to serve the communities that they're sending you there. So focus on our small businesses, focus on our farmers, focus on our schools and our seniors, and talk about ways of making our community thrive. And that's mission number one, and that's something that every member of Congress, every one of those 435, has the ability to do, if they focus on it, is to serve those communities back home.
Well, on November 6th, when we go to the elections, we'll be electing a congressman for the newly redrawn 19th, which you're running for. Seat previously sort of held by Maurice Hinchey, who has been entrenched in this area for 20 some odd years. And then we're also going to elect a president.
Right.
And who and how, who that is and how that affects the whole overall status of our country and how it's run is something that really remains to be seen. I'm curious to hear your thoughts about that when we come back.
Okay, great. Thank you.
This is Kingston Now. More with Julian Schreibman when we return. Welcome back to Kingston Now. On November 6th, we head to the polls and pick a congressman for the newly redrawn 19th District. One of the men running for the office is Julian Schreibman, who joins us again. So what are the big issues facing the country after the elections in November?
Clearly it's going to continue to be the economy. We have an economy that's moving in fits and starts. We have enduring high unemployment. And unfortunately, Congressman Gibson and the Tea Party crowd that he runs with in Washington are not focused on those priorities of the folks back here in Ulster County. So we really need to really focus like a laser. Again, go down there and serve the communities. This is a unique, very rural district, actually. Kingston is the largest city in the entire congressional district. So we have an opportunity now to really advocate for small businesses, for farmers, for the communities here. And that's the way that we'll get back to a strong economic footing in the Hudson Valley Catskills region.
So how do we do that? How do we improve the economy? We have an overblown deficit. We talk about some there's people talk about, well, we can't raise taxes. It's going to crush, the incentive for business to grow. But at the same time, we can't cut programs. How do we manage that?
Sure. One of the things that I hear over and over again, and absolutely we do have a deficit issue that needs to be addressed. But we also need to make sure that we're getting out of the way of businesses that are ready to thrive and prosper. So small businesses have created 2/3 of all the new jobs the last 5 years. And yet what I hear over and over is that our small businesses and our farmers are forced to deal with the rules and regulations that are written for the big, powerful voices in Washington instead of for them. So what we need to do is find ways to refine those rules so that small businesses aren't burdened in the same way. We can give tax breaks to small businesses so that they can add more jobs, continue to grow, add jobs, and really grow the economy in this region. So those are some of the common sense steps that we can really take to make a difference here.
What is a secondary issue? I mean, so much attention is being focused on the economy, and rightly so, but when we get that resolved, what do we do next?
Well, when we get that resolved...
And I have faith we will.
A lot of good things flow from that, of course.
Yeah.
If we have a strong economy, as we did in the 1990s, that's when you saw our deficit really start to decline and go to a surplus. When we have more people working, more people participating in the economy, that's critical. Of course, one of my priorities is stopping the distractions that the Tea Party has been really foisting upon us in Washington and making it a dysfunctional place. Making it harder for women to access critical health care, trying to turn Medicare into an underfunded coupon program. I told you that I came home to this community in part because my dad was sick toward the end of his life. And nothing really made what was otherwise a traumatic, horrible experience that every family deals with at some point easier than the ability to go to any doctor and say Medicare and just go ahead and get the treatment that you need. So it's such an incredible program that people depend upon. And the idea that Congressman Gibson has voted to privatize it and leave our seniors at the mercy of the insurance industry is something that I just absolutely oppose. And so I want to ensure that I'm there to protect the seniors of our community.
As people head to the polls in November, what drives people's votes? Is it their financial interests? Is it some of the social issues that people raise during, for instance, the Republican primaries? What do you think drives, is it an elderly person who says, you're going to cut my Medicaid, Medicare, I'm not voting for you? Or is it a person making over $250,000 a year said, oh, you're going to raise my taxes because I'm the 1%, I'm not going to vote for you? What drives the voter?
You know, I think, I hope, and from what I've heard in talking to voters around this district, is that it's a matter of priorities. That they're looking for a representative in Congress who's focused on the needs of these communities, who is prepared to make advancing these communities a priority, who will support those small businesses, support the farmers, be a champion of our public education system, rather than being distracted by that faraway Tea Party agenda. It's that focus on our communities that I think is critical, and that is what I'm certainly hearing from the voters is what is important to them.
Well, it's mid-August now, and the election is just a couple months off. Do you foresee any debates with Representative Gibson?
I certainly hope so, because I offer a very clear choice in terms of the values and priorities I have with those that his voting record reveals. So I'm very much looking forward to the robust debate of the campaign, and I certainly hope and expect that that will include some face-to-face debates as well.
Julian Schreibman, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Jimmy. Pleasure.
That's it for this week's show. Thanks to Laurie, Slavin, and Ginny Botero of Hudson Valley Adoption Services. Find out more about them at hudsonvalleyadoptionservices.org. And thanks again to Julian Schreibman. Find out more about him at julian4ny.com. Remember, all of our shows are now archived on our YouTube channel, and you can find that link on our Facebook page. For Kingston Now, I'm Jimmy Buff. See you next time.